Um, are we ready to start? Okay. Well, what I want to do is bring up issues that come up often with brokerage, professional standards, complaints, different issues, and then we'll discuss them as we go along. So first thing I'm going to do is just take some of my notes. We'll start off at the MLS, the local MLS, issues that they see a lot. And what Margaret tells me is not turning in forms on time. There's fines for that. Showing houses without permission is a complaint. Should we just start talking about one or the other first? Okay, turning in your photos and closed and pending listings. You have a short period of time to get them in, and there's hefty fines if you don't. Our office has had a few complaints that she told me about, but normally our people are probably the best of all the companies in the Rochester area. Normally we're the best, but it's still an issue. Turning in MLS change forms and getting signatures is another thing. You have to have broker signatures on certain things. You don't have to have them on other price changes. You don't need a signature. But if you cancel a listing, extend a listing, or append a listing, or cancel or extend, I believe you have to have the broker signature on too. And there's hefty fines for not doing that too. Check my notes here.
So on those MLS change forms, when the broker signature is required, if you turn it in Dotton, does one of our admins put the broker signature on it where it's needed?
Yeah, they will. Or actually, I'm doing it with their authorization. Put it that way. Okay.
But you said you don't need it for just a price change?
Price changes, you don't need it. But you do need it if you're extending a listing.
Or canceling.
Or canceling one, withdrawing, anything like that. And then when you turn in a pending or closing, you have to have all the information, the type of financing. If those things are missing, they will fine you. Usually they'll give you a warning, but if you keep doing the same thing over again, they'll fine you. $25 a day. Yeah, something like that.
So that is when you're going to change it to pending or closed.
Closed.
But it's probably go pending first anyway, right?
Yeah, pending will go pending first. You don't need a signature on that, I don't believe.
But you need the financing sent.
You need, when you turn in a closed on the MLS change form, you have to have the financing type if there's any concessions. Okay. And I think you all find that when you look on MLS and you see a sale that sold for higher than the asking price, it's obviously that they probably paid some concessions. But if you don't see that, those people are in violation. That agent was in violation when they turned it in. They could get fined for that. Somebody might turn them in.
It's not always.
Not always, yeah.
One that sold for more and there are no.
Right, yeah. Nowadays, it's multiple offers. You're getting that. With MLS, she said that we're doing a pretty good job here in our office, but the biggest complaints are pictures, showing houses without permission. Even if you know it's vacant, get permission. I had a hearing last fall where a local realtor here was found guilty of entering a new construction house without permission. Even though she was in it before, she just went back 2 days later, showed it again, even though instructions said to notify the seller. So she got a hefty fine and some education. It's just simple things. It's kind of common sense things. You know, if you're going to show a house, make sure you have permission, even if it's vacant. Any discussion?
Well, it's kind of a safety issue too. It's good that you booked it and that somebody knows you're there.
Right. And who knows? It might have contractors in there that you're going to be interrupting or something like that. But always get permission before you show a house. Get your photos in on time. Get your documents signed. Change forms. And then the next, we sent out a little notice here a few weeks ago or a week ago or so about the issues I'm finding as a broker here. And I'd say 99% of the issues I find are missing items on disclosures, or for instance, they'll get down to a line, they don't know if they have it or not or whatever. They'll just skip it, but you have to have something checked. NA, yes, no, or NA. If it doesn't work, no. I found them where sellers are still checking yes and no and forgetting about the NA if they don't have it. They're checking no if they don't have it. They're not checking no because what they have it, it doesn't work. So check them over before you turn in the sale. Then Nikki doesn't have to try and find it, and I don't have to try and find it, or I can scan down and see that everything's filled out. There's a few things on disclosures that kind of come to mind when you get to like water softeners and security system, things like that. They'll check yes, they have it, but they won't check if they own it or not. You have to check something. And if they don't know an item, have them write unknown on it. Then speaking with those things, don't ever write anything on a disclosure for a seller. And if a seller's elderly or unable to fill them out, have them get a third party, a relative, friend, relative, whatever, to fill it out for them, because you shouldn't do anything on it at all. And if you see something that's wrong on it, don't white it out unless you're sitting there with the client and have them initial it. That goes for any form. We see white out on quite a few forms, listing forms, this and that. If you white something out, don't write in over it. It's better, I think, if you cross it off, write in the right thing, and then have your client initial it, but never white it off without permission and an initial.
So what about when your clients do that? For instance, with the seller disclosure, you give it to them to fill out, then they realize they've done something wrong, they white it out, correct it, whatever, by the time you get it, that's already been done. Like, I might not be sitting there with them, they fill it out ahead of time, and I go to the listing appointment, and they've taken a little whiteout thing, and
have them initial those things. If you can see it's obvious that they whited something out, just to make sure that somebody doesn't think you did it.
Okay.
If it's done right. So whiteout's kind of a no-no. I would rather see something crossed off and initialed than white out, because you never know what was underneath it. What else? I just this week somebody checked. Oh, they checked that they had the line that says if you had any work done on your house that you did not have permits for. The customer checked yes, but in the next line he said he had the basement remodeled or something like that. Well, I just think that he probably checked the wrong one. So that's going to bring up a flag in an inspection or with the buyer that says he didn't get permits. Then you're going to bring up a can of worms if he didn't. If he did get his his permits, you'd have nothing to worry about. Just have him change that and initial it. That he didn't.
But sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they don't, but that's going to get you off the hook if you know for sure that they didn't. And you might document that somewhere, that you talked to them about not having permits, and the seller told me they didn't. So if it comes up in a hearing later on, a buyer might come back and say, hey, we found out that you didn't have permits, and the guy says, well, I disclosed I didn't. You still might have a problem. Just get it documented. Okay, disclosures.
Is it better to just, if it's really messed up, just have an extra one and have them start over?
That's probably the best way to do it. Or take that page, if you can.
Right.
I try to keep copies of everything in my car just in case I forget to bring something to an appointment. And that would be best if you can do that, and it doesn't look altered. On forms, just about everybody misses the number of pages on the listing contracts, buyer rep contracts, and disclosures, and well disclosures and septic. They don't fill in the number of pages. That has to be in there. I can't do it for you. Nikki can't do it for you because there may be something missing. There may be a septic system disclosure, whatever. a compliance disclosure. But make sure you fill in those number of pages. It's real aggravating because the first thing we look at is it seems like everyone is empty. It's getting better now since I took over here, but I know it's one of those things that's just irritating. It's a very simple thing to do, and it's not.
Well, I think for a lot of us, like, just, we never filled it out. I mean, so it was just not a thing. You didn't pay any attention to it. And I remember way back when our purchase agreements used to be page 1, blank out blank.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't even know until you got done with everything, and then it wouldn't get numbered until everything was signed and submitted. And I think June used to add the page numbers to it. So.
Yeah, well, we're not allowed to enter anything on it because if there's something missing and I signed off that there's 10 pages and there was really 11, like an addendum to an addendum to a disclosure, then I'm signing something that I don't know.
And I'm assuming on the seller disclosure, it's pages 1 of 10. Now you don't count those last 2 pages that are the grayed out and stuff.
If you don't count those, they're dealt with somewhere else in the purchase agreement that you have to provide that notice, and it being there is your proof that you gave it to them, but you don't number it. I've seen those pages numbered too. It does, if you do number it, it's not a sin as long as you put 12 and you numbered those pages 11 and 12, but you don't have to. On the well, I see on the well disclosures and septic, the maps are usually numbered wrong. They usually say 1 of 1 or nothing. The map is actually page 4 of either the septic or the well disclosure. And it says on there that the well disclosure is attached or whatever. You could probably take that as it's attached to both and make them, 1 of 4 and attach the map to both. But if you attach it to one, that's good. You should give it to them. As long as it's checked well and septic, you can attach it to one of them. If it's just well, attach it to the well. If it's just septic, if they don't have a well but they have a septic, attach it to the septic disclosure. And number it 4 of 4. And the first page of the disclosure is 1 of 4. Is that perfectly clear? Okay. Issues. Okay. Don't show a home without permission, even if you know it's vacant. Top 12 legal issues. This is online. It's with the Minnesota Association of Realtors. Sale of buyer's property contingency. That comes up a lot in ethics complaints and mediations, this and that. Is everybody kind of familiar with the contingency of sale? The only way you can remove a contingency addendum on a sale is by having a purchase agreement on that property. There are some ways to get around it. If the bank has given them the authority to buy it without the sale, but you have to do that by amendment. You can't just ignore the contingency addendum. Got that?
Yep.
Okay.
If a lender says you can now afford this without the sale of your home.
If you get a letter from the lender, it says that you've been approved to purchase this property without selling your home, you'd have to write an amendment to the purchase agreement, an amendment, not an addendum, it'd be an amendment. That's another thing that comes
Because
up
it's
once in a
after
while.
the fact.
It's after the fact, after the closing or the final acceptance.
Right.
You can write an amendment removing the contingency addendum and
It removes
Instead
it
of
without
seeking-
having to have the purchase
Property sold,
of
right.
their home. Okay.
and that's the only way you can do it. Otherwise, if they say, well, I want to remove it, they can't. They
Right.
just can't. They have
So you
to have a
want to
purchase.
attach, you want to make sure you attach a letter from the lender
Right.
stating it and the amendment.
Right. That's if you don't have a letter from the lender and the other parties agrees to that, go ahead and get it signed. but it's better to have the letter that they can purchase without. I have another thought on that. Now I can't remember what it was. Contingencies they're tough these days because they're getting bumped now and then. But make sure your form is filled out right. The number of days you have to remove the contingency is important. I've seen that blank on one or two. I was guilty once, but we fixed it. Okay, the next big one is inspection reports and inspection contingencies. If they're being filled out properly, the time frame of inspections, if they're within the right time frame. Amendments, addendums, any discussion on that?
I have a question for you, Jim, on the purchase agreement under the inspection contingency area, when you say, if you check the buyer does not wish to have a home inspection, is all of the rest of that just left blank
On the
on the inspection contingency part?
well, if you don't, well, on the main purchase agreement, you're going to say if you're going to have one or not, then you don't need an inspection addendum.
Right, but then there's still boxes in the rest of that on the purchase agreement, right? Because we don't have an addendum anymore for an inspection.
Right.
So it's all in there. So if I say the buyer does not choose to have, it declines a home inspection, purchase agreement is not subject to home inspection, there's still more boxes in there and.
Oh, to leave your home on the market or that kind of thing?
Yeah.
You can check those, shall or shall not have the right to market the house.
But if it's declined, then right, I mean, it doesn't really address
Well, it
it,
doesn't,
and I'm
yeah.
not really sure, so I'm still putting in there does not allow obtrusive testing or, things like that, but really not, I mean, I'm just not sure, should we still check that box, does not?
You could check a box or else put NA next to it, just so you have something on there.
Does it have to be checked?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I think
Does it have to be?
I think it should be left blank, but I'm still so not, because that part's new. It doesn't seem like we should touch any of the rest of it. The same with financing. It's not FHA, you just leave all that blank. But I don't know.
Put it this way, if you leave it blank, it's not going to throw up any flags or anything. But if you put NA on it, that's going to make it perfectly clear that they're not going to do any. Anyway. Any other inspection issues? Repairs. Getting them done timely and spelling out the time limit to have repairs done, that kind of thing. Like on your repair, when you ask for repairs, put a line in there that says repairs will be done like 3 days prior to final walkthrough or something like that, or prior to final walkthrough. So you check to see if they're done. It's usually better to have it done a little earlier so you don't have a surprise the last day, delayed closing. Other than that, next one is death on the property. If you kill somebody, if somebody died on the property, it depends on the circumstances. If it's just a natural death or something like that, you don't have to disclose it. Some nationalities will ask you if anybody died in the property, and you have to tell them. Can't withhold it, because it's something that some cultures won't move into a house that's had a death in it. You do have to disclose if there's different circumstances like murder or something like that.
But if we don't have to disclose natural death or suicide, are you sure we're supposed to disclose it, or would that not be representing your seller?
You don't have to, but if for some, like I say, some religions and stuff, they won't buy a house if somebody's died in it. Some of them won't.
But it's not a material defect. I mean,
it's not a material defect.
So if you don't have to disclose it, I'm wondering could you get in trouble with your seller if you disclose something that you don't have to disclose?
Well, I don't know. I was taught to disclose everything, disclose,
but you have to know it too. Because if they don't have to disclose it, you don't know.
I'll check into that further, and I'll send out an all points bulletin.
Right. The guy that just taught the class at CMAR for our required continuing ed, he had taught one prior that I think we had discussed somewhat here in the office about if you know that a neighbor is a sex offender.
You don't have to.
Right, but if somebody asks you, do you then have to disclose? And most of us, I think, just felt morally we would. And this guy said, no, like you better not.
Referred, yeah,
Just send
because
them
you
to the
may be,
website.
you may be wrong. The guy might not live there anymore, or the guy might have been,
And you don't even know if that's a disgruntled neighbor who just didn't like
Right.
this guy. I mean, there's crazy people out there that'll say bad things about somebody, and we don't want to add to that. So I'd send them to the website.
yeah, send them to the website or give them the phone number and just say, I can't comment on that, and let them do it. They can ask all the questions they want, but you can't. Right?
Yeah, because he was even saying like, don't, even if it's your buyer or something, like, don't even push them, like, be sure you check this, you know, be sure, and you can't over enunciate that if you don't do that with every single person you work with, so.
Yeah, point it out on all of your forms, especially for buyers, that, you know, it's pointed out 2 or 3 times in your buyer rep and agency, and
And here's where you go, and
just tell them that you're not allowed to get involved in that type of thing, and here's the number. And if you told them that, and if they're really concerned about that, document it somewhere that you told them. Even if you have to go back to your agency, circle it and say, I told them specifically where to call on such and such a day or whatever. When we go to hearings, I'm on the state board for ethics board. When we have hearings, it seems like the people that have the most documentation that can tell you what they did every step of the way, they win at more than half the time. People come in there cold without any documentation. It's just hearsay. If they documented things, it's in writing, we respect that. It makes a difference. So document, disclose, get a new job, whatever.
are there a lot of these every year?
Not a lot. Somewhere in here. Actually, complaints are down.
But like, where they actually have to go and appear.
Yeah, well, it's a process. When somebody files a complaint, you file a complaint against somebody or somebody files one against you, it first goes to the complaint goes to a grievance committee. I'm on the grievance
Right.
committee too, and that's just a telephone conference with the attorney, our association representative, and 3 other members of the board. And we get the complaint, then we have to decide, assuming that that complaint is true, if it goes on to a hearing, and if they violated certain articles of the Code of Ethics. And the biggest one is Article 1, so read that as soon as you can. It's dealing fairly with everybody. But if we decide that if everything is true, it would go on to a hearing. If we think that, if we look at it and they're saying things that don't deal with the articles that they are complaining about, we can either add articles to that complaint, or we can find that it's not going to go
Valid.
forward. It's not a valid complaint. Sometimes you just see, well, they don't like their agent or whatever, and it just doesn't go on. Things happen. If it goes on to a hearing, it's scheduled. Well, it has to. Any complaint has to be filed within 180 days of the event, or the last event in the chain of whatever happened before. 180 days since it could be the last communication. It could be the date of the purchase agreement. It could be a date on an email. It could be whatever. But if it's past 180 days, we won't even look at the complaint. We'll look at it, but it doesn't go on because they're too late. So keep that in mind. If you have a complaint against somebody, make sure you get it in timely. But it's still fresh in your mind.
How long do clients have?
Same thing, 180 days.
Would that be 180 days after a closing?
180 days after the last event in the series, either the closing or the last communication between, maybe there was an issue after closing that they didn't think was resolved properly, ethically or whatever. If they have an email that has a date on it, we have to decide by all the documents, what date are we going to say is the last date known in this transaction or whatever it is. Complaint could be just by emails, whatever. But 180 days is the magic number, so if you get past that, don't bother. I mean, you can bother, but it's not going to be heard. And then after we do decide to send it on, they have the complainant has the right, or the respondent, I mean, the person who complains against, has the right to appeal that within 30 days, I believe it is. So that could be appealed, and it could be thrown out on appeal. I'd say most of them are not thrown out. They go on to a hearing. And then the hearing comes, and we go through both sides. Everybody does their oaths and all. It's just like a court hearing, except they do allow lawyers, but we have restraints on lawyers and stuff too, because they're lawyers. but after the hearing is done, we have an executive meeting, and we decide who's at fault if they violated whatever article of the Code of Ethics. And then we decide on a fine or a penalty. The penalties can be money, education, or the worst thing is loss of license or suspension of license. I haven't been in on one where we suspended a license yet, but we've given some hefty fines. $5,000 is the max, I believe. But anyway, it's no fun to go to ethics hearings. It's not even fun being on the meeting either, but you do learn a lot of things. Like I say, most people that have all their documentation in order have a better chance of winning.
I do have a question. So like when you get, ethically, we want to take care of our clients that we've did business with beyond the closing. So I get that. Because we're television, that's what we do. But you're working with a lot of other agents out there. Is there an actual rule of how long that, like, so let's say you worked with a buyer and the buyer kind of has some questions, because even though they waive their inspection, they're finding things now that were in the disclosure that they're in their house, and it's not, something's not working, or it's not even plugged in, and they're wondering, do I dare do this? Don't I do this? And so they ask me, and I say, let me make a phone call to the listing agent. And the listing agent is just like avoiding everything. I mean, is it just once the closing is done, everybody goes and technically you're on your own, or?
Well, after the closing's done, it all depends on if there's a legitimate, something that wasn't disclosed in their disclosures. You find that after they move in. But then
we didn't, if an inspection's been waived, but let's say in the disclosure, it not only said that there was a water softener, it was owned and it's working. So now you get moved in and you're checking out your utility room and there's a water softener, but it's not turned on. So you're kind of afraid to turn that on because is there a leak? Is there, you know what I mean? So all you want is a simple question answer. You're not even trying to go after anything. You just want to know before you end up with a mess in your utility room. Not get anywhere with that.
Yeah, well, if they signed arbitration is the way to go.
Okay.
If you can't get them to agree to make sure it's working. If it's not working when they moved in, or it's hard. I know we're not inspectors. We can't.
Right.
We can't.
And it might just be turned off for any other reason. All you're doing is just trying to call the other agent to see if you can just get a question answered.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But if they don't answer back, you're just
document it. Do it by email.
Okay.
I always tell everybody, do it by email because it's pretty hard to pull up your text and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's a way to print text, but I don't know how.
Right. Or even if you had that conversation on your phone, go back in and email and say,
write it
for
down.
our conversation
Write
on
it in
this
your
date.
file. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, make a lot of notes in your files. I usually use I use Amanda's closing sheets or folders.
Mm-hmm.
And on the back sheet, there's a lot of blank spaces to put things. So write down every conversation you had, and then what kind of reply you got, or if you didn't get a reply, and say I'd email too. Email is always the best proof, but it's good proof.
It's more of a paper trail.
Yeah. I had a house that there was a big crack in the wall in the basement, and during the inspector didn't see it because it was covered with a great big 4x4 sheet of plywood and they put shelves on it. Well, then we went to arbitration. It didn't work out the way I hoped it would or thought it would. But anyway, it's one of those things that they hid, and we went to arbitration. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for my client, but could have just the other way too.
I just didn't know technically how long, when you're working with another agent, is technically it's all pretty much done after you did the final walkthrough and the closing complete. So there is no obligation to do anything else at that point, or unless it's discrepancy in the disclosure and you find that out more when you move in.
Well, that's something you deal with the agent first.
Yeah, definitely.
Then if the agent's not willing to help you out with that, then you can just tell me you're going to go to arbitration if it isn't handled properly.
Okay.
And maybe they'll do it. Or you can pay for a new whatever. And that happens too. We seem to shell out a lot of money sometimes just to keep things going. But not all agents are going to be like you. They're gonna, they won't cooperate. Some of them just say it's over with. You can't do anything about it. But there's always the arbitration thing. There's always court, and small claims court or whatever, and they'll listen. Usually.
Well, and my situation isn't that big of a deal. I just was kind of wondering. It sounds to me like the line kind of is drawn at the closing.
Closing, it starts something else out.
Right.
Then your legal options come in.
Right.
Or,
Okay.
the ethical. Well, here's the most complaints are against Article 1 of the Code of Ethics. That's dealing honestly with all customers. Then Article 2 and 3, then 4, 5, 9, 11, 12, 13, and 18. Those are the biggest complaints that are handled by the Ethics Board. This chart. These are like grievance committee calls. We've had this many. That's it, ethics complaints. This is 2014, 15, 16. So you can see that they're going up, ethics complaints each year, and then how many have gone on to hearings and how many were grievance committee calls and the ones that went on to hearing. They're actually up a little bit or down a little bit from last year, up from the year before. But we're always told that if you have a legitimate complaint, file it, because we need to weed out the bad realtors too. You know what I'm saying? If somebody really gave you the shaft and you know that they're operating unethically, file a complaint, because we don't need bad guys out there.
Is that ever brought up, Jim, when you're on those, when you're hearing those, is there ever anything that is said like this person has had 10 complaints against them in the past, or is everything starts with a clean slate?
Only at the final, when we decide if they're wrong. After that, when we go into the penalty stage, then that's brought up. So we don't have any clue if they've done this before until we find them innocent or guilty or whatever. And we won't find out unless we find them in violation. And then the attorney or for the representative of the ethics board will tell us this is their third complaint or something like that. Then we hammer them. I shouldn't say that. But, I think they called me the hanging judge for a while because they want me at every hearing, it seems like. I'm a big believer in, people do something wrong, they got to be penalized. You can't just let things slide. And I've heard it, I don't know how many times from panel members, they all do that, or they all do this, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. They're all doing it wrong, things like that. But, just be really careful. I suggest read the Code of Ethics at least once a year or whatever, just to be familiar with it, because that has all your guidelines on how to operate your real estate business properly. Let's see what other complaints we have.
So one thing I always wonder the best way to answer, if somebody says to you, what do you think of Jill Smith, the realtor from XYZ Realty? Your opinion of them is not good. You've had dealings with them where you don't think that they're good agents. We aren't allowed to tell that to people, even if it's true. How do you respond to that? I mean, I'm obviously not going to say, oh, they're awesome, but.
Rich Batchelor was my mentor when I got into the association board. And he told me, you know, what he was driving up the road, and he'll, if I'll say, if I had a deal going with Joe Blow, and it's not going too well, he says, you know, you might be violating the code of ethics right now just by saying that. We are not supposed to say anything about any other realtor derogatory, because you're violating the code of ethics.
So how do you answer
hard.
a question?
Yeah.
I mean, if someone asks you directly, what do you think of this person, and your opinion isn't
Can
good.
I say no comment, or take the what, the Fifth Amendment? What's that?
I mean, can you even
Yeah.
say that? The Realtor Code of Ethics prevents me from answering that question.
You can say that, yep. And if it's negative or positive, I mean, positive, go ahead and say it.
Right.
If it's negative, they're gonna get the gist of it, I think, but you're not allowed to say anything negative about another realtor or your clients. That brings up Facebook. That's another thing that's coming up a lot lately. People are posting things on Facebook that are derogatory toward agents, the agent's client, whatever, and they're posting it out in the public. Now, they can get sued over those things. I'm surprised there aren't more suits right now. People really need to watch what they put on Facebook, because it's going out to the world and it's evidence in a hearing too. Is that perfectly clear?
Just a question on as far as like a seller. I ran into it over the weekend. I stopped at an open house to go through, and I overheard the agent telling visitors to the open house. To me, it would be not really a violation, but not right. You're kind of discussing motivation with them. Is there a reason they were selling? You know?
You can do that if
You can do that.
the seller says it's okay.
Okay, but I don't know if they did it.
But
Yeah.
the agent knows. I mean, only the agent
So
would know
they
that.
say, hey, you know, you go and tell them I want to move the mortgage away from snow. You can tell them that. But if you don't know, then you can't. If they don't say it's okay, you really can't say
Right.
they want to explore.
Yeah, divorce comes up a lot, you know. Some people say in a divorce situation, I don't care what you tell them, just get rid of the house. Okay, he told me to say whatever I want to, just sell the house, or she did. She'd have to agree to that too. But in that case, yeah, you can say they're getting a divorce, they have to move, they want to be out by such and such. It's probably not the wise thing to do, but you can. You won't get penalized for it. But if you come out and say, tell them that, you know, mom died, or give them any motivation, you shouldn't be giving them that. And Barb wrote down some things here too that I think I came up on. If anybody wants to see this, this is our guidelines to a grievance committee. Tells things we have to just decide if which articles apply to a complaint. Okay, here's Barb's concerns. Never give legal advice. Give a client a list of attorneys to call if there's a question that you are not sure about. If anybody asks you about anything that you're not in, inspections, legal issues that aren't straightforward or you don't know about, get an attorney, have a professional do it. Social media, be careful. Don't complain about another real estate agent or company. Discuss any issues with another agent with your broker. Never write on the property disclosures. If the seller is unable to complete, bring in a third party to assist. Misleading or embellishing verbiage in marketing and listing is a problem. Can't use builders' names or company brand names in your wording. Everybody should know that, but some people don't. State the facts, not your opinion. So seller states that the roof is 3 years old and it's obviously not. You still have to take their word for it. You can't change it or whatever. You can always.
That's the time when you might want to talk to the seller about arbitration and
Yeah.
honesty on like,
Right.
if the buyer finds that you've lied on this, they have the 2 years to go through process and
That's right. For arbitration, they have 2 years. They
call
have
you on it.
7 years, I think, for court legal system. I think it's 6, 7, something like that. Yeah. Let's see. 10% of all lawsuits involve agency. Explain every single line. Memorize the fiduciary duties. I say memorize these because these cover everything. Also, procuring cause is a problem and an issue, and it's the hardest one to decide who's entitled to a commission. And like you have a client that's a buyer and he's going out to open houses and looking at open houses, and that open house agent grabs them, convinces them to write up an offer right then. Chances are you probably lose that client, especially if you don't step in right away. And you could have shown them 50 houses and they went to that house and the agent says, would you like to write an offer? And they said, yeah, we would. They're supposed to ask if you're working with another agent. A lot of them don't ask. And then the other thing is too, is a lot of buyers have never signed a document with you, buyer rep. So you're out of luck, basically. Even if you do have a buyer rep and they go to an open house and decide they want to buy that house because of what that agent did or said or convinced them or whatever, and then he helped them through the process, got them to closing, you can't come back after him and try to get your commission. It's like procuring cause is an unbroken chain of events up to the decision of that buyer to purchase that house. We just had a hearing recently where same thing, a buyer went to an open house or under contract with an agent, happened to be in our company, and proceeded to purchase a house. Our agent complained, wanted the commission. And I said, well, these people asked me to write the purchase agreement up. He did know that they were working with them, but they said, no, we want to write it up now. And then he followed through with an inspection. He followed through with closing. And in the end, we negotiated a settlement. But if it went to a hearing, 9 times out of 10, our agent wouldn't have gotten paid because she didn't actually do the unchained event. She got a buyer rep, but didn't show that property until after that purchase agreement was done. She went in and looked at it. So she was kind of behind the line on it. But just be careful with your buyers. Make sure that they understand, and it's in big bold letters, that if they go into a house and buy one, that they may still be obligated to pay you. I've never held anybody up to that. I don't hold anybody hostage or anything. But if you explain to them if they do want to go out on open houses on their own, that they hand them a bunch of your business cards and say, hand this to that agent, tell them that you're working with me, and I'll be doing any negotiating. And it's in their best interest too to be represented by themselves. So procuring cause, it's a tough one, but it happens a lot. Let's see.
How often do you think that the agents do when one who thinks that they have procuring cause?
Well, the one that did the most work, and it's the It all depends on what they did. If they can document that, okay, this person came to my open house. And here's another thing. They'll come to an open house and say, well, I've been working with so-and-so, and he'll say, well, have you signed a buyer rep? And they'll say, I don't know. Yeah. And, well, do you have a copy of your paper? No, they didn't give me one. That happens, I think, about half the cases that we're in. Documents weren't provided to either party, a buyer or a seller. And if they don't have the documents, they have Lori Megan.
Right.
We're talking about procuring cause, right?
Oh,
And people going to open houses and then getting hooked by that realtor writing an offer, even though you have a buyer rep, it's probably not worth the paper it's written on, unless you can prove that you did a bunch of steps that led these people to buy the house. But once that other agent steps in, writes a purchase agreement, leads them through the rest of the process up to closing, it's pretty tough to get paid.
So I had a case a few weeks ago where I was showing an open house to this couple. They weren't represented by anybody. And I called them back that night, and they came back, looked at the house the other day, the next day with me. And then we talked about dual agency, and he was a lawyer for real estate, for an attorney where he does real estate deals and other things. So then they called me back Monday saying we decided to go with a different realtor to make an offer on the house, and that was all up about the procuring cause.
Well, he's an attorney. It's pretty tough to fight that. But it's their decision. If they want to switch in the middle of the stream, they can. Fighting it might be pretty tough. You might want to see if you can negotiate something with that agent that says, okay, I showed them the house, I did this, I did that. Did you have buyer rep too?
No, I didn't have a buyer up to that point.
Okay.
But they ended up canceling the offer, so.
Oh, thank God. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, those things they're all up to a hearing board to decide, but they always decide on who did the most work to make this thing come together. And if one of your clients decides they want to go with somebody else, there are terms for that, abandonment or whatever. They can do it. There's certain terms for that. I should print some of this stuff out here.
so if you had somebody who really didn't want the dual, could you then at that point, if you found out who they were deciding to work with, give that agent a call and say, they weren't comfortable with this, and I have been working with them, would you do a referral? I mean, at least try to get something out of the deal.
Sure.
And I guess they can say yes or no to that too,
Right.
but it would be kind of nice if you could at least feel like, okay, I respect that, but I'm gonna call this agent they're gonna go with and tell them the story and see if they'll be willing to do a referral.
Yep, you can do anything you want, and you can always try. And there's agents that say, no, they're mine, and forget it.
Right.
It's sometimes futile to go ahead and try to just threaten anything that you're going to take them to ethics hearing or whatever.
I just figured toss that out there and see if
Toss it out.
it sticks.
Yep. We just did one recently that we did get a nice referral fee. And
I mean, at least then if they say yes, you're not out everything.
right. And then you don't want to make an enemy out of your client
Right.
either, because they'll tell 10 people, and those 10 people tell 10 people that you're a bad agent or whatever. So just try to get them settled any way you can first. And then sometimes it's just better to just drop things. Sometimes you get a client that's gone rogue and there's nothing you can do about it. Drop it, go on to the next one.
Yeah, if somebody tells you that they're not comfortable with dual agency, my next question to them would be, do you have somebody that you would choose to work with otherwise? Or can I help you get somebody and then
That's a good way to put it.
like turn around and go for that referral?
Because it's a good idea that it's a referral. I mean, if they're-
Absolutely.
That's a good way to put that too. So you get that information and then hopefully you're still a hero in their eyes. Because at the end of the day, you still want to be the hero in their eyes, because even if they end up doing that, they still may recommend you to other people.
Right.
Coming soon advertising is one it's becoming a problem. People are advertising houses coming soon or putting signs in the front yard that say coming soon. And,
You're not supposed to do that, are you?
well, you can with MLS withhold. And
That's specific to our MLS, correct?
our MLS, yeah, ours, yeah. There's ways of doing it, but you got to do it right. So if you get into that situation, look at the rules.
So, when you say it's withheld, so you printed all the paperwork, that's the withheld box. Isn't it a certain amount of days in advance that you can do it?
No, you have to have the form, the withhold from MLS.
Okay,
And there is a document I've seen, I don't know if we have it, but it's authorization to market, pre-marketing.
yeah.
And that way you can pre-market with the
If
permission.
you want to pre-market, right? I mean, if you sign the listing agreement, it starts today and then you're sending that withhold, then when it goes on, it'll show that it's already in 8 days or something, and you don't want that. I mean, if you're doing pre-marketing,
Yeah,
you want it to, when it goes live, to say 1 day on the market.
market said something about that too. If I can read.
And I think it's really specific as far as like, you can say that you have something coming up as long as you don't give the address. And I think maybe the picture of the house, like you can say, I've got a 4-bedroom, blah, 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 you know.
Northwest Road,
It-
whatever it is.
Right, I mean, I think you can do stuff like that as long as you aren't specifically marketing that property, where you're being more general. But when you actually say this address, this is the picture of the house, then that's where you have to have it, where you have to have something signed by them saying that it's not on the MLS yet, and that you're allowed to market it.
There's one thing I need to clear up with her. She said authorization for marketing. No contract is needed to do that if you have this authorization to market. And then withheld, you have to have a contract. And if you list withhold, you can't have any showings either, not even by yourself.
Oh,
Withhold from the market,
There's that.
but you avoid days on market.
I think most of my listings have shown for
We didn't go into detail on that, so I'm not
They're not
absolutely sure about
so they're
that.
not withheld.
If you have any problems with any other realtor and you want me to talk to them, I will be happy to. And I try to make things work for everybody. Try to. There's a slight fee though. It's called zero.
Yeah,
There's one other thing I wanted to discuss here. I know some of you may have been to classes where it's about bulletproofing your transactions. Basically, it's about keeping ahead of the closing date and making sure that your lender is doing the right things. And there's nothing worse than getting onto a day before closing and you can't close. Financing issues. That's one of the big complaints. Exclusion clauses on your offers. I use them. You have to be pretty clear about what your client wants to do when you're buying. If you're in a multiple offer situation, it has to be written in a way that specifically says that your buyer is willing to give X amount of dollars and make sure it's up to a certain amount.
Oh, escalation clause.
Over and above any other offer, and that the listing agent will provide you with a copy of the purchase agreement to prove I can't remember the exact
so we
wording.
are allowed to do that because Michelle Smith said that, but
You can.
Okay.
Well, Michelle Smith says you can. I know I've talked to her about it before, and I'm sure you can.
My very first one you helped me with, that's what we did.
You have to put it in writing, and if everybody agrees to it, it's agreed to. It's part of the contract. Same thing, thinking about that is on contingency addendums. I came across one not too long where it was written in on other that if the buyer can prove, or the buyer's lender can finance or give proof of financing without sale of the property, the contingency would be removed. That's okay to do too. But you put it right on the contingency addendum. So it's part of the contract. Is that perfectly clear?
Say that one more time. I'm actually
Okay.
gonna ask you to say that one more time.
On the contingency addendum.
Right.
That you say it's contingent on the sale of the house.
Right.
Okay, and then that contingency addendum, it says all the ways that you can remove it. There's only one way, is that's to provide a non-contingent offer purchase agreement to remove it. If you write in down below, if the buyer's lender or whatever can, I've got the wording somewhere, not in my head, can provide proof or whatever that buyer can purchase a home without purchase this property without selling their home. Buyer and seller agree to remove the contingency.
Which is basically what we started with at the beginning, get a letter from the lender and an amendment
An
saying,
amendment,
it's
yeah.
like basically the same thing.
Yeah, you put it on an amendment, and
Right.
then once you do remove it, then put it on an amendment that buyer and seller agree to do that.
So this you can just add basically to the purchase agreement part under there, and then you would do it again
When you
had that
when
letter.
you-
Got it.
when you remove the contingency. Yeah, let's see, commission disputes. And paying commissions to others, or you can give up part of your commission to anybody that's a part of the sale. Means buyer, sellers, the other agent, if to make a deal work, but you can't give any money to anybody else for a referral. You can give it referral money to other agents, but not to the public. If you can't say that I'll give you $1,000 if you give me a lead, and it follows through. You can't do that. It's illegal. You can treat them nice, take them out to dinner, maybe, whatever, but you can't offer them any compensation or give them any. I think that covers just about everything I was thinking of. Any other, well, you weren't here first. I covered all the important ones first.
I had a question. I had a buyer under contract who was at a house, and she starts looking at the pictures, and she goes, I know that girl that owns this place. And I just, I'm looking in another room, we're walking on. Before I knew it, she had texted her a bunch of times saying, how many offers have you got?
Oh,
What's your best offer that you got? Brad, should I find out how much the best offer was? And I'm just like, so, what do we?
That's out of your control. I don't think it's anything you can,
And so she says.
that's
"We
good
got
information.
another offer on the house, and she asked me, should I find out how much that offer was? I
If you
said,
want to,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah,
You can.
if you want
it
to.
seems really dirty, but that's okay, huh?
Well, it's, I don't think it's dirty. It's a friend of hers. If she was gonna call the other agent, I wouldn't let her do it.
Not really, just somebody she knew from long ago,
Well, you were well enough to text her.
Right, they had her in her
Yeah.
And
contact.
they're in the same town, but yeah, I mean, they're chummy or anything, but she's trying to find out all this information.
As long as you didn't give her the contact.
Right, you're fine.
Her phone number, tried if she's already got the number.
We live in a really small world, a lot of people know people. And if you weren't present, she would have did it after your appointment anyway.
For sure, yeah, for sure. But then she starts asking me what she ask, so we can position ourselves, and
They say it's up to
I don't
you.
know. Like, boy, Twins are gonna have a good year this year.
Yeah, right. Yeah, don't talk politics either. Speaking of
No.
that, yeah. The politics will get you killed every time. Be what? Neutral. Don't say anything bad about other realtors or their companies. because somebody might be listening in, somebody could tell that other agent, and then you're in an ethics complaint. Stay out of jail.
What have you seen the biggest fine from?
Article 1 of the Code of Ethics, that deals with being honest with other agents and clients. I don't think I mentioned this, but on disclosures or any changes, don't initial anything for your customers, even if they say go ahead and do it. And I have a builder that says, sign for me, Jim, sign for me. And I'm not going to do it anymore because you can get your head in the ringer. But don't initial anything, don't sign anything. We did have a case that actually went onto it went to 3 hearings, ended up in ended up right here in town. But said he could prove that those initials weren't his, but he didn't do it at the hearing. Brought it up after the hearing. That's too late. Anyway, don't even think of that prospect.
No pen to paper on disclosure.
Just keep your hands off it. Unless, okay, you can email your client, say you forgot to check number whatever,
Right.
Then you got something in writing. Otherwise, just take it over to them and have them do it the right way. Document, disclose. If you know of any disclosure items, it should be on a disclosure that the seller won't disclose. You are obligated to disclose those things to potential buyers.
So do we just write something up separate then, or how do we do that? Because we can't touch the paper, so we.
You can't touch the paper, but I've done realtor notes after the disclosures that realtor Jim Clark is aware that there was this or whatever, and to cover your butt.
You just
And
attach it to the disclosures?
You can attach it or put it in with the disclosures. But you have to disclose to other agents any item that may affect the buyer.
Like if they say, we have never had water in basement, and clearly they have because of the water lines on the wall.
Well, if you know there was, I mean, if they say there wasn't and there's stains on the wall, well, I don't know, maybe it happened some other way. But if you absolutely know for sure that there's something going on in this house, like, you know, house caved in or it was remodeled 2 years ago and they didn't disclose that, you have to disclose.
And then you do that in the addendum to the seller disclosure?
Disclose it to any potential buyer or their realtor, for sure.
Well, do you send an email to everyone, or do you put it down as?
Not to everyone, but if you have an inquiry on the house and you know something, a defect, you have to disclose it.
Is that where you said you could do your realtor's notes and attach it right to the disclosure so it shows on the MLS?
You could, but you
realtor?
probably should get your seller's permission to do
Right,
that.
that's what
But,
I'm wondering.
Do everything you can to get there, you know, just tell them you have to disclose this. I'm
Right.
aware of it and I have to tell any potential buyer, so you might as well put it right here. And that covers their butt too.
Mhm.
But what happens a lot of times in these disclosure things, well, you never told me and I never did, and then we have disputes, and then you'll end up paying for it as a realtor. Because you knew about it, you didn't tell them about it. So you don't want a $50,000, foundation bill. Or $10,000 one. You don't want one. Cover your butts. Anything else? Did we cover enough? Anything we should cover in more detail? Do these and you'll be okay.
Maybe from that MLS panel, that we were on where they brought a bigger thing that's coming up now is the Photoshop.
Oh, yeah, don't Photoshop your photos.
Like, don't turn the gravel driveway into tar.
Don't make your grass
Make the
greener.
old patio look like a nice damp patio.
Don't make your grass greener.
There's a few agents who look at like, the grass seems to be a very toxic green in your pictures every time. What
True
kind of
green had just
filters
come to.
Yeah.
they use?
Yeah, the dog was active over the winter.
That's really dead spots.
No, it doesn't.
No, that's like
I've
fertilizer.
got 5 dogs and I've got grass already that needs to be mowed.
Really? No, mine always
Got little
die
clumps
off and
of
we always have to add.
Good growing
lime to
grass
it.
right in the
That's
middle of
where
the
they're
bed.
peeing.
Oh, yeah, where they peak.
That's what kills it.
Yeah. I got those big pea dead spots and then you add a little barn lime on top of it and they come back.
The rest of it's just good fertilizer.
Well, I guess in closing, I'd say that if you have any questions about anything, call me. Try not to get into a dispute with another agent or your clients before you call, and we'll try to give you the best advice possible. Okay?
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Before this case is closed. Thanks for coming.
How are you?
Appreciate it.
Good. Looks like you have one vacay.
I agree with
Yeah,
you.
God. So fun. Where have you been? Where have I been?
Since you're back. I don't get to see you.
I remember what you said to him.
I was tired because I put my space heater on.
You got all the warm.
And I fell asleep. That's why I was.
My head bobbed for a bounce, and I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go to that meeting. I gotta go turn it off.
Isn't that great, that tutorial?
Probably would. They're little
Wasn't sure what that is.
That's okay, thank you.
And they must have changed it for all the new upgrades. And I had new ones too, but I was like, it's up. So way too much time.